Well, hello again, everyone. If you've only just joined us and you missed the previous session, my name is Felicity Barr. I'm a broadcast journalist and television presenter, and I'm delighted to be here for this particular session, which has the rather grand title, Best of British Behind the Scenes of Large-Scale Broadcast Events. And I think we all realise that in the last few years, the UK has played host to numerous big-scale events. And this session is all about how television newsrooms plan to prepare for those events and also cover them when they happen. And I think my three guests here are probably still recovering from the weekend's efforts of the Coronation because they were all heavily involved in that. We'll hear more about that in a moment. But first of all, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and explain exactly what their role is. Let's start with Maddii, because she's next to me.
Hello, I'm Maddii Lown. I'm the senior news editor for events at Sky News. So I look after kind of all our major coverage of big events, from coronations to elections, I guess.
Juliet?
Hi, I'm Juliet Mieville. I work producer for special events for ITV News. I work in the newsroom, but I also cover the live events for coronations, for funerals, for elections, and overall weddings and other breaking news.
And Sarah?
Yeah, and I'm Sarah Parrish, and I have the same role in BBC News. I work in UK content, and I have to also cover radio, though, as part of our remit, covering special events and major breaking news stories. So everything from coronations to elections and Brexit votes and prime ministerial changeovers in Downing Street.
And let me tell you, everything you see on screen, behind the scenes, so much planning goes into these events. And I thought we'd start with a bit of an outline about how it actually works behind the scenes. So you all have titles that do seem to refer to the fact that you're full-time on special events. Is that how it works, or are kind of units sort of galvanised when these events happen? Anybody who wants to start?
So, I mean, at Sky News, where there's a very small number of us who do work, we kind of jump from event to event. But when it's something like a coronation, you bring people in from across the newsroom. So we had interview producers, planning producers with us, obviously reporters, presenters, the podcast team, the online team, all working in a group to work out our look and feel of the coverage. And that would happen on various different events. So all different people join us for all different kinds of things.
What's it like at ITV? Are you again sort of, in a sort of separate corner planning?
Yes, exactly. We've got a small team, a handful of people that are full-time on events planning. But when a big event like the Coronation comes along, then we expand. We draw in new people from the newsroom, people who've done it previously, perhaps come back to do it with us. Also, we've got the ITV Nations and Regions, and we rely on them as well to help with us on these big events, and we draw them in as well.
And what about the BBC? Because I can imagine it works slightly different for you, because you've got a proper BBC Studios events team that you're kind of sort of liaising with.
Yeah, we have. So the BBC is sort of split into two teams that would cover these kind of major events. There's BBC Studios, who do and produce what you see as the beautiful ceremonial coverage presented by Hugh Edwards or Kirsty from the Palace. And then there's the news side, where I work, and we do all of the wraparound coverage. So all of the bulletins and breakfast news, but as well as television, we've also got to cover all the radio programmes from Today to 5 Live, and all of our language services on both television and radio, and obviously our online and our app offering.
And I forgot at the start to mention the fact that if you've got any questions for our panellists, you can do so using the Slido system, which I assume most of you have actually seen. You log onto the Slido, put in the code, and then just ask a question, and I can pose it to the panel a little bit later on in the session. Now, traditionally, we all know there is a pretty healthy rivalry between they're laughing, between the three main broadcasters of news. That changes, doesn't it, when you're talking about something big like a royal wedding, a royal funeral, a coronation, even a general election. Talk me through how much collaboration and negotiation is needed between the three of you. I mean, I guess you know each other quite well now.
We know each other really well, but actually, I mean, as broadcasters, we're part of a massive machine for a major event like a coronation. We work very closely with the government, the Royal Household, the DCMS, the MOD, Westminster Police, Met Police, and we all move very slowly together en masse, and we can't really leave anybody behind. So there are lots of things that we do where we have to collaborate, and we have to make our product individual in other ways. But there's lots of stuff that we can't do without each other.
Yeah, I mean, simply that you simply could not be replicating it for each particular channel. You have to have that pool coverage, right?
There's not enough cameras. producers in the country. You have to share it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not just the coverage that's sort of negotiated and shared, it's the infrastructure and things behind it. We split out who orders the cabins, who orders the tents, who, where the compound is going to be, how we're going to split that up and things like that. So there's a lot of that, and access and accreditation, dare I mention that, and we all know how it works and how we need to get our teams in, and we sort of collaborate together to make sure that we all get our teams in to do what we need to do.
How does it actually work, though? I mean, it probably happens even further up the hierarchy, but how does it get decided who is going to do what and who's going to be placed there? And I know things change, but with accreditation and stuff, that has to be sorted.
I mean, with who does what, between the three of us, that very much depends on the event and whether it's a news pool, whether it's an event of which we're kind of buying into a pool. So we would kind of, between us, just organically talk about, okay, who has cameras where, who can do the pool on this day, who can put a camera into there. Accreditation we'd do unilaterally. If there's a problem, we would. Have you got this problem as well? Should we go together because power in numbers helps?
I mean, do you actually, in those sort of terms, do you actually kind of almost, as it were, you're literally signing the letter from 3 different companies
we often
saying...
do that. Yeah, we will often do that.
Yeah, we have done that in the past.
Yeah.
Saying,
everyone understands it's a shared problem. It's not someone sort of saying, "Oh, I'd rather have this." It is actually collectively,
and
all of the broadcasters.
Yeah, it's better you go together as well.
International broadcasters as well. We work well with them as well on these things. So,
which is actually quite nice because. Normally on stuff like that, you are working as individual companies and you're very much on your own. You're competing for whatever interviewee you want, whatever position you want. To actually have something where you're kind of backing each other up. And
I mean, don't get me wrong, that still happens.
I can imagine.
I think what we're talking about is big compounds. When you kind of got to work together, you cannot put separate infrastructures in and things like that, so we have to work collaboratively together there.
Or if someone says your on-air position starts from 7 a.m. and we all have programs which are on air from 6 a.m. then rather than going separately, you can send one email and they know it's a problem for everyone, so it needs to be sorted.
I know. Does it count more when there's 3 of you saying?
For sure.
Yeah.
No, for sure, because we're only going to make sensible suggestions. We're not going to make suggestions which are plainly daft, and they're because of on-air and editorial needs that we're making those suggestions.
And is there a good, well, obviously there's a sense of trust between the 3 of you, particularly given the last year that we've had and such big events that need to be planned for. But is there what I'm trying to say, is there a sense that this is a big occasion, we all have to rise to the occasion, and we have to get it right? It's a sense of responsibility, and you're not on your own.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think, when you have those big events, you do, as Sarah says, bring all the different stakeholders together, and that's when it takes on a slightly different tone of collaboration in order to make all those, get us all into the position at the right time to do whatever, our own individual desire is editorially to do. It does take on a different form, that I think, to the day-to-day of... we have collaboration day to day in terms of political pools or royal rota and things like that. So there are different things where collaboration does exist outside of the major events as well. But also space sometimes dictates the collaboration. If you've only got 12 metres, we've got to between us to agree what that space is, and it's easier for us to do that as individuals and come together.
I think it is very different to other even a general election where you do have to work with the political parties, but with a major event like this, you have to move en masse with the stakeholders. And I think unless you've been involved in planning a project like this, to get an idea of who's involved would be very tricky as an outsider or as someone stepping into it. So you do have to the whole group has to move together at the same pace. There's no overtaking, and you can't leave anybody behind, because then you don't end up in the right place at the right time altogether.
That makes
sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the word stakeholder there. The BBC has quite a lot of that. It's not just your, there's Hugh Edwards or whoever, Kirsty, presenting from whatever royal event there is. The number of platforms that you have to service is quite large.
It is quite large. I think I talked about BBC Studios. I mean, they produced a beautiful programme on BBC One on Saturday that went on the air at 7:30 and came off at 3. I think unless we didn't sit back and kick back at 7:30 and open the champagne. We had to carry on broadcasting on our global channels, our radio outlets, obviously for our web and our app. And then we came back on the air at 3 o'clock on BBC One, our full-blown, our bulletins, and we have to carry on with the news channel. I mean, our BBC colleagues are amazing. I'm going to quote some stats, actually.
Go on.
Which I found out.
We love a stat.
We love stats. I found some stats the other day about the number of, this is my BBC Studios colleagues who I adore, the number of cameras that were involved in the last few coronations. So in 1937, for George VI, there were only only three external cameras, because at that point, of course, radio was the main outlet. In 1953, they managed to increase it to 20 cameras on the route and in the Abbey. And for Charles's coronation last weekend, on Saturday, they had 103 cameras into 7 OBs across the route and in the Abbey. But if you add on the concert at the weekend and the lighting up the nation, there were 150 cameras at 17 locations.
Wow.
I mean, and they're not all staffed. A lot of them are remote, but that just shows you the scale of how broadcasters changed over the years.
It's interesting as well. People would think ITV, well, actually, you're servicing ITV, that's it, you don't have to do much more. That has changed as well, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean, like Sarah talks about BBC Studios, ITV events were on air from 8:30 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, equally with, over very similar numbers of cameras along the routes. And for arrivals as well. And yes, so we were servicing that as well, as outside of the ITV News as ITV events, but we were also servicing our newsroom at the same time, ITVX. We've got digital platforms, but I also, on many of these conversations, represent ITN. So there is Channel 4 News, Channel 5 News, GMB News as well, that we're also out there news gathering and servicing as well. So it's, many platforms as well to
many
stand up
platforms.
for.
And it's interesting you mentioned Channel 4 and Channel 5. Is there much collaboration within ITN to make sure that everybody is well serviced, or do you have to maintain that separate side because you are different news outlets?
No, there is collaboration, and it sort of flows down from me in representing ITN on these conversations, but they also part of that conversation as well.
And what's it like for Sky? I mean, you've got radio stations, you've got online, but also you've got your international clients as well that need servicing.
A lot of international clients. We have a huge social offering as well. The video offering on our website, we're really into streaming now, so we had to really think about a different way of covering a lot of the coronation this time to bring in a younger audience as well. So we have the 24-hour news channel, and then we were really trying to push for the younger people from the social, from TikTok, from Facebook, Instagram, and then the website.
Yeah, I mean, your main focus, in some ways helpful, isn't it? The fact that you have a 24-hour news channel that is up and running, and it is used to going 24/7. So
it never stops.
It never stops. So actually, in some ways, I guess that gives you a little bit of a preparation for something very big coming along or something breaking coming along, because you're all set up.
Yeah, you work out your plan of the whole day, literally the 24 hours of the day, and then I will talk to other departments within Sky News, and they'll say, okay, well, we want to take that bit for this platform and that bit for this platform, and radio want to present from the Abbey, and then they're going to move to Canada Gate, and we kind of look at the whole view of the coverage and what little bits different people want to do. We might put in something extra in different places for the streaming channel, that kind of thing.
Difficult balancing act in the run up when the demands are being made.
Yeah, it's difficult keeping track of, as I'm sure Sarah has as well, because you've got so many people you're having to look after. But it's difficult keeping track of stopping duplication. So if one reporter on TV's got an idea they want to do a VT about, how do we make sure that works for all the platforms as well? Because for us, it's not different programs; it's all Sky News. It's one brand, so it doesn't really work if we have the same story told in different ways on different days.
It's interesting. Outsiders might say, well, hang on a minute. You've got 3 main broadcasters. They're all at certain points. They're literally going to be showing the same coverage. It's pooled coverage. It's coming from the church. It's coming from the Abbey. It's coming from wherever. And you've got the same shots. You're talking over the same shots. You're listening to the same audio. What is the point of that? And I guess the responsibility for the channels is you personalise that your particular channel's way of getting into and out of those shots with your presenters, etc. And it's important, isn't it, to maintain that individuality?
Yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, obviously, BBC Studios were on the air during the bulk of the day, but we, to make our breakfast programme different, we built on the relationships we had with the MOD, and so we were on the train with the troops coming in to Waterloo. Sorry, guys, which no one else was. So we were able to tell the story of the morning of the journey of the troops coming in from their barracks. But it's about putting your own personalities out there and getting your own on-air talent out and doing to show to let them shine, isn't it? That's
and also the look of it. Like, we worked for months on like how we wanted our studio to feel and the branding and the graphics, and we really spent a lot of time like refining how we wanted our program to come across, and we used that look on all our platforms. So it's not just about the TV look. The one look we have for the story will work for the whole of Sky News. The presenters, the guests, that's such an individual way of kind of talking about a story.
What was it like on ITV?
Yeah, so for the coverage itself of the event, obviously we did have our own cameras along the route and then for arrival, so we can make our own editorial choices around how we cover the movement of the King going to Buckingham Palace in the morning, and then we were able to be nimble with that and able to use our own cameras, so we make our own coverage around that, ceremonial coverage, in addition to our own studio programme, which comes from Canada Gate, and we make our own editorial choices. We had Ian Hossain on the Mall, walking down. That was considered choice because we wanted to be there with the people as they did that Mall movement along the Mall. So, you can still make your own style and feel according to what you want to do editorially. We still get to choose much of that individual shots. It's not all pulled in
and I think
these events.
I think everybody recognises you guys all did an amazing job. I mean, everything that I've seen written has been pretty much plaudits about the best of British, if you like, in terms of broadcasting. I mean, the Brits are very good at laying on great events, and we're also pretty good at broadcasting them as well, in my opinion. Logistics-wise, we've already talked about the fact that basically I think every cameraman and camerawoman in the country is employed during those set piece events. I mean, it is a massive, massive undertaking, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows when these big events come along, everyone in the newsroom is going to be needed. Everyone in every part of ITN is going to be needed, whether it's the international productions team or whether it's the breakfast teams, the good morning teams. All our freelancers that are regular know that they're going to be called upon immediately for this, and and everyone steps up, which is great. Everyone realises that this is a national event, and makes themselves available. There are certain roles that you pick quickly. Soundies, go for soundie quickly. There don't seem to be too many of those, but generally speaking, it's we draw from our whole family, which I think we've all said. It's not just the core of the newsroom, it's the whole family of our broadcasting, and from directors who might come in from different parts of the network and things like that. So.
And it's an event on telly, but it's an event for us as well in the newsroom and for our colleagues. It's a big deal for everybody who's working on it. And you want everyone to feel that moment and feel that it's part of history you're working on. These don't come along that often. I know we've had a lot in the last few years, but we're not going to get another one of these for a while. So it's really important that you kind of bring people with you and that everyone's excited about it and wants to work on something like this and wants to be proud of the work that they do. I think that's a really key thing to kind of keep the momentum.
Yeah, because long hours. Everybody ends up working long hours.
Oh, for sure. And actually, we began working on this obviously at the end of last year, and a lot of people ignore you at the beginning because you're just going to meetings and it's all like, it's not till May, it's all fine. Gradually, as you get past the new year, people start to get interested and start to knock on your door. Can I come? Can I come? And actually, we've all had a front row seat on history for the last couple of years, really, for some major events, and so have the people that we've had working with us. They've all had an amazing experience. I mean, hopefully partly down to what we've done, maybe, I don't know. But if you're a camera crew on a platform on the Mall or at Canada Gate or outside the Abbey, I mean, you can't buy those tickets. You can't buy that experience.
Do you feel it in the moment, or is it only when you look back?
Yeah, you do. Well, I did
I
anyway.
I certainly did this time, for sure, yeah. I think you have to step back sometimes, just going to go, whoa, this is a moment, and I need to remember this, not because I was running around doing something else. I need to just stop for a second and just take it in.
I said to a colleague.
Sorry, I was going to say, is that what you were doing on that? Because we described you as kind of the planners extraordinaire for these things, but actually on the day of this event, what are you all doing?
So until we went on air, I was really busy, and then for the first couple of hours, but then I said to the colleague, if I'm still busy at midday, something's gone wrong. So.
Yeah, likewise, actually, I was in our newsroom, so I was liaising with our news editor who was doing all the news gathering, but also news editing the special programmes. So making sure that our presenters got to the right place and on air. And like Maddii, if it's relatively quiet, you've done your good job, and it was. There's always a few things that someone doesn't get quite where they should do, or whatever. But generally speaking, there wasn't anything major that, needed sorting out. Yeah.
And you, Sarah, where were you?
I was at Canada Gate, so I arrived about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I saw all of our OBs getting on the air for breakfast news. The train made it. I was like, it's a major achievement, broadcasting live from a train. And yes, I think if I had been running around all day, things would have gone really badly wrong. On the day, you've briefed everybody, you've deployed everybody, everyone knows where they're going, what they're doing, and actually you're there to firefight. And if there are no fires,
wonderful. But it's unlikely, knowing the world of TV news as I do. It's your plan A, your plan B, and your plan C, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Then you go to plan D.
And then I don't know what happens with plan D. Fortunately, I don't think I've ever got quite as far as plan D, but I've definitely gone to a plan C. But that's what planning is about, isn't it?
It's about anticipation, and you have to be, attention to detail is the answer. We had a 66-page document telling us what we were going to be doing on that day, drop a week before. We have to read all that and digest it and make sure that it's right, so that our crews are in the right place. And there's, and no one else was going to read that 66-page document in detail. I guarantee all three of us did, and that's where we come together and say, actually, that isn't quite right, that's not going to work, So attention to detail, but resilience and flexibility when, not accepting no, you can't have that, well, why not? And that's not, that's really not going to, work for everyone. So trying to be reasonable and fair and negotiate and having a good skill, negotiation, flexibility and resilience. Attention to detail.
A lot of patience and persistence, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I guess you might not want to talk about it, but sometimes you have to have difficult conversations with people, don't you? When you're planning big events, you have to be negotiating, and you have to have the trust of the people that you're negotiating with.
No, you do, and actually these guys will know that my mantra during the planning process became, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good," because sometimes you have to know which battles to pick with the authorities, or not with the other stakeholders. You have to know when you want to push back on things they're saying no to, and when you're going to hold yourself back and know there's a bigger battle coming. It's about patience. I mean, it is actually it can be a terrifying experience. The whole thing can be terrifying. It's like taking off in an aircraft and no one's put the wings on yet. Sometimes you're waiting. You know someone will put them on at some point. You just don't quite know when. You just have to wait, because you know it'll be okay, and in the end it always is. Yeah. It's partly because of what we do.
So far.
It's because of what we do, but also it's because of the system. But it can be a terrifying experience, and that's why we're very friendly and very close, because actually we live it together, and that helps our sanity to get through it.
Yeah. Otherwise you feel like you're in your own little echo chamber, and nobody else gets it.
Yeah.
No one else gets it. Totally.
Yeah.
You guys have been doing this a long time. Planning for events, some more than others, I suspect. But what has changed, do you think, over those years that you've been doing it, that where we've got to the point today, and what happened with the Coronation? How have things changed? I mean, is it the tech that's changed? Is it the demands that have changed? Is it everything that's changed?
A lot of the tech has changed. I mean, we have live view embedded now in our workflow, and the live view depends on 4G. We learned in the Jubilee last year that 4G doesn't work on the Mall because everyone's got their iPhones out, everyone's posting on Instagram and Twitter. So we had a few failures for that. So the BBC R&D worked with some other broadcasters, including Sky and ITN, to develop a 5G network, which was a kind of private network which sustained a lot of our live views down the Mall and around that area. So technology has made a massive difference, hasn't it? I think that's just one example.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago we were talking about satellite trucks in every location. That now we've also got satellite and we've got fibre. And it's everywhere is fibre. Back from Canada Gate all the way back to our offices. We produce our programme from Gray's Inn Road, not from Canada Gate. So all those cameras around the Mall and around Westminster Abbey, all coming back to Gray's Inn Road, and that's where our feeds are coming out from. The technology around delivering that safely and with resilience is quite phenomenal. When I started, I think we had 30 maximum incoming sources at ITN. Now we can take well over 100 lives, simultaneously in, and the planning around that is definitely, it's gone up. We've also did 5G. We sliced with Vodafone. We sliced the network, and we took put our pictures to air with 5G also. So, we're all pushing forward in the technology. Each time we do this, someone has got a new innovation, which is exciting, but also demand. You talk about interest. I think, there was a time when people may have thought this might drop off, and it's a phenomenal interest in what we're doing in this large-scale events, and for all those that do other large-scale events, this is, doing this kind of national royal event is a pinnacle of that. It brings it all together.
Anything to add to that, Maddie, before
No, I think you two have very well.
You leave it up to the tech people, right?
Yeah.
Leave it up to
Every time.
You've got to trust them, and you've got to have them on speed dial for when things go wrong. I'm going to read a couple of questions out from Slido. Thanks for putting them in. Here's one. What's tougher to cover, a royal event or a big breaking news story?
Ooh.
I would say at Sky News, a breaking news story is what we do. So anything which involves any amount of planning and opinions being put in is harder. A breaking news story, you get on the road, you do it, and you do it as well as you can in the moment. But for me, a royal event with a lead-up means lots of opinions, so that's tougher.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would imagine at Sky News, it's all your deadlines are so immediate that anything further than a week away is actually quite hard to plan for because people are so focused.
Yeah, they're focused on the next hour rather than the next week.
And keeping things going.
Yeah.
That trying to persuade people to be, look, guys, we really do need to think about this. Can be quite tough.
You have to be persuasive.
I'm sure you're very persuasive, Maddie. Juliet?
I think they're two very different beasts. I mean, we turn around, breaking news, we'll turn around on ITVX immediately. We are, Star Bulletin may come a bit later, but that content is out there. We are expected to turn around immediately, But the beast of a royal event and the expectation of delivering, it's been year after year, of these amazing royal events. I think actually the build-up to that is quite extraordinary, where it brings in all the parts of ITN together and ITV to deliver such quality output, that is there for posterity forever, that I think is really proud of doing that.
Sarah?
I agree with Maddie, actually. And from a BBC perspective, from BBC News, there are so many bits of the BBC that want space and want coverage. And trying to balance all of them and work out the priorities and make other people have negotiations, with each other about who's where and doing what, I think is quite difficult. With a breaking story, you just go and work it out when you get there. And most of us do both of those things. I still do breaking stories as well, and I quite like doing a breaking story. I find it quite liberating sometimes because you're going back to your roots and back to the skills you learnt in local radio. And I think I really like doing breaking stories. Do you like them as well?
Yeah. Depending on what they are.
I mean, the reality is there's normally not that much time to think, is there? I mean, you go into kind of also breaking news pilot, really, when those things happen. And
I think when you do one of these big events, it's an opportunity to get it really right, and that is really satisfying as well. And making sure that you build on it each time you do it. You find a different bit of technology or a different workflow or something. We've all got stronger. Those programs have got stronger and better through the build of that process. And I think that's very rewarding.
That's an interesting thought. Have you kind of learnt a lot about your own organisations? From no, gosh, no, don't. No, it's be fine. But your own organisations and how they work through those relationships and through the planning that you have to do in some respects. You get to see all aspects rather than just the day-to-day news.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly have a much greater understanding of all the departments in Sky News than I did before I did the events job. Before my old job when I was running the planning team, I would primarily work television with some online, but now I really have to embrace everybody. And that's been really great to kind of make sure that, and to bring all of our coverage together to one place. It's been a really, really great experience.
I think learning, all the technology that goes into all of these events, working better with that and developing that means our editorial content gets stronger and it's better and it's more reliable. And that, bringing those aspects together for me is really, really good.
I'm sorry, this is one definitely for Sarah. She's going to look terrified now. I've got to put the glasses on to read it. How do you appeal to the vastly differing audiences when you're comparing Newsbeat on Radio 1 versus Breakfast versus Radio 4? I mean, they've all got their own individuality anyway, I guess. It's already kind of there.
Well, they just treat the story in a different way. So they may have the same footage, or the footage may be shot in a slightly different way. So if you're interviewing somebody for a TikTok video or for an online piece that's for the youth, you'd film it slightly differently. You might have the same interviewee, but you'd film it differently for the 1, 6 or 10 maybe than you would film it for something that's targeted towards another audience. But it's to do with the treatment, and there are people who are specialists in those areas who know how to turn what you've generated in a general way into something that's going to appeal to their audience.
Yeah, so you kind of produce the main thing really, and then everybody is able to take
It's their own treatment.
treat their own treatment for it. We're nearly approaching running out of time. I wanted to talk about whether or not you want to stay in doing what you're doing at the moment, or you absolutely had enough of trying to do these big set piece events, because you've been planning for so many years. Do you sometimes you were talking earlier about you quite like going on and doing a day-to-day news thing for a change, and do you think, given what we've seen over the last couple of years, do you think those sort of specialist units are going to be not used quite so much in the coming years, and you'll be able to kind of have a bit of a relaxing time?
It's going to be used differently. I mean, we've got a general election around the corner, which we were just talking about that just now.
Yeah.
That's the next thing on our agenda at the moment, I think, really, after a bit of a break. I mean, we've got the Olympics. My counterparts on my department are, half of them are in Liverpool for Eurovision. So there are always things that come up, special events that you can't always foresee as well. So.
And that's the thing. People sit there and they think about the big set piece events as being your royal funerals, your jubilees, etc., etc. But the reality is, there's always a presidential visit.
That's coming up.
There
totally.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All go on, carry on.
ITV. So I also work on the overnight election programme. So we'll be looking, go forwards to that and all the sort of the data behind all of that and how we do that. So it's we juggle between the royal events and doing overnight election results. So in the UK or in the US, so there are there's always something they'll be on the horizon. Maybe this year or next year, who knows, election-wise. So.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you love your job? Can I ask that? Is it what makes it something that you want to stay in?
Wow.
Good question.
That's a good question. I think I have to say it's the people in many ways. I mean, I love my colleagues, and I actually also love the people I work with from the other organisations. There's a great sense of camaraderie and achievement. And as I said earlier, we get to witness things that no one else gets to see. We have an amazing view of the world, and I don't think giving that up will be quite tricky, I think.
Yeah, it's a huge privilege to do what we do. The camaraderie, this team with our own teams. I've been in this job for about 10 years now. And it's wonderful. As you're ringside seat, history, Iceland history at university. To think that I'm now there, part of that history making. People will be studying in 60 years' time, 100 years' time, coronations. And thinking that you were there and you had it's if you told my 14-year-old self that this is what I would be doing, I would be saying, wow, I'm really lucky. So, no, not going anywhere.
Final thought. We talked about a little bit earlier about the key to all of this being the collaboration, the negotiation, and the fact that you end up being jolly good mates because, you're all in it together. Are there occasions out there where things go wrong and someone else comes to your help, your aid? Does that happen?
Yeah, it does. And I would take no joy in something going wrong for either of them, but for the grace of God, someone's fibre goes down. It could easily have been ours if it's somebody else's. So you help each other out. If there's been times where I've needed someone to shoot something which I couldn't get a camera to, and one of you guys has helped me out, and vice versa, it happens. And you've got to keep that relationship going forward, otherwise the whole thing falls apart.
Any specific incidents you're allowed to tell us about? You don't have to.
I mean, there was a time at the Jubilee where suddenly people couldn't get to the compound. I can't remember which of us had a camera to go and interview Cliff Richard, but one of us did it for each other. And because they suddenly couldn't the roads were shut, so they suddenly couldn't get the guests to Canada Gate, and we both needed it.
Horse guards or something, weren't
that
they?
was
Yes,
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so, there are exactly reasons where we might end up, sharing for logistical reasons, and that it is those kind of infrastructure, logistical reasons that things fall out. But, sudden royal walkabouts is, it's something that happens in Windsor,
Friday afternoon when the King and Queen when the King and the Prince of Wales did walkabout on the Mall, and we were suddenly having to work out who was doing it, and likewise at Windsor on Sunday when they did it as well.
And let's face it, there's always an opportunity in the future for, to pay it back at the next big event. You never know.
Next time it could be you.
Yes, exactly. Next time it could be you. That seems an appropriate moment to end the session. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our guests, Maddii, Juliet, and Sarah, for giving up their time. Thank you, guys.